Everyone, welcome back for another science video. Today we are going to be talking about food webs. So we are talking about something new today. So what is a food web? This is something different from what we talked about the other day. So go ahead and think, what do you think a food web is? So is it the same thing as a food chain? I want you to take a moment and think about that. Are a food web and a food chain the same thing? No. Kudos to you if you got that right. No, they are not the same thing. So let's take a closer look at what a food web is. So a food web shows the potential path of energy from a more realistic standpoint. So when I say a more realistic standpoint, I mean it's looking at how energy is transferred between organisms more so in the real world than a food chain does. A food chain just looks at one part of what organisms eat and how they live in their environment. So organisms don't eat the same thing all of the time. So a food web is showing how they don't eat the same thing all the time and how it works in the ecosystem. I'm going to show this to you guys today in two different drawings. Well, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. I moved one page too fast. So I'm going to show you guys the difference first between a food chain and a food web with a drawing. So this is our food chain. We have level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. We have our producer, our primary consumer, our secondary consumer, and then our tertiary consumer. So a food chain just goes straight across. So you should know the answer to this question I'm about to ask if you were listening. So do we eat the same thing every day? Take a minute, think about it. We just talked about it. No, we do not eat the same thing every day. We eat different things every day. So a food web is going to show that. A food web is more of a network. So let's go ahead and look at how that's going to play out. So starting at the bottom of our food web, we have our producers. So you can have however many producers are in your ecosystem. I'm just drawing 3 for my example. Now, branching off from your producers, you have your primary consumers. But because primary consumers don't eat the same thing every day, or you might have different primary consumers that eat the same thing, you can have more than one branch. So as you can see, now I have 4 primary consumers. Next, we're going to have our secondary consumers. So for instance, this secondary consumer eats 2 different kinds of primary consumers. Organisms don't have to eat the same thing every day. That's what the food web is showing, that they can eat several different things and still be a part of the food web. And then heading up towards the top, we're going to have our tertiary consumer, which of course eat secondary consumers. Now let's look at this with actual animal and plant examples. So I'm drawing some grass for one of my producers. I'm drawing some berries for another one of my producers. And then lastly, I am drawing a leaf for another one of my producers. So we're starting off with 3 producers. So branching off from my berries, I'm going to go ahead and draw a bunny rabbit. Guys, don't laugh at my drawings. I was trying to get these done quickly. You know, it is what it is. And then another one of my primary consumers that I'm drawing is a butterfly. I'm also drawing a bird. These are all primary consumers that are going to be eating plants. And then for my last one, I'm going to draw a ladybug again, which a lot of you guys wrote me and said that ladybugs eat aphids, which they do, but they also eat leaves and small grasses. So those are all of our primary consumers. So then we're going to move on to our secondary consumers, which are things that would eat those. So I'm going to draw two secondary consumers. So we have like a little small bird, but then we have a much larger bird that might consume the small bird. So that would be a secondary consumer because it's eating the primary consumer. And then the next thing I'm going to draw is like a reptile. We have a snake, lizards. Those are going to also be secondary consumers. And then finally, we're going to move to our tertiary consumer. Y'all, please don't laugh at my drawing. I do not know how to draw animals very well. So this is a fox. It's a fox. But the fox eats the bigger bird and it eats the reptiles. And then this is our tertiary consumer. So it's all in a web. Not every organism eats the same thing all of the time, and this just gives a more realistic view of that. So we start with our producers, move to our primary consumers, then our secondary consumers, and lastly at the top, we have our tertiary consumers. So what's being transferred in this food web? We talked about it the other day with food chains. Do you still know the answer? Let's see. Energy. Energy is the thing that's being transferred between the levels. Kudos to you if you got that before you heard me say it. So energy is transformed and transferred from one organism to the next. And that's why we have food webs, because it shows that so we can see it with our eyes. This would be way more confusing if this just had to be explained to us. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next science video.